الذين آمنوا وتطمئن قلوبهم بذكر الله ألا بذكر الله تطمئن القلوب.
السلام عليكم Sheikh Muhsin.
Salam. Alhamdulillah.
So you had a good trip from Toronto this afternoon?
It was okay, alhamdulillah.
It was okay.
It wasn't too bad.
All right, so I won't to take too much of your time, but I have some questions for you based on the course that I attended with you, and I was really, really impressed. And then I went into your resume, and I was impressed with your learning, both from the religious perspective, because you have studied under the professional students of Sheikh Al-Albani, and also you are a certified professional training specialist and a coach in leadership development from American Institute of Professional Studies. And also you have Masters in Leadership, right, from St. John's University, UK. But what actually intrigued me was when I saw in your resume that you're passionate about human development and the dynamics by which faith transforms humans, right? So that really intrigued me. I was just thinking to myself that getting to that self-actualization state, that azima that you called it, right, or the ihsan level, it needs to begin somewhere, right? And where it actually begins is with that self-awareness, right? But for that self-awareness, I'm thinking that we need to have a good understanding of what the self is, right? And is it just the physical entity, or are there some other elements that are part of this entity? So if you could begin there, and then we'll build on that, inshallah.
Yeah. In the name of Allah, the merciful, the compassionate. Peace and blessings be upon our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Well, I believe this is the big question. What is the self? What does that even mean? And interestingly, in all languages, the word self is quite an elusive thing. It doesn't denote or refer to a specific entity. It's used very loosely in all the cultures. And I think this refers to a fact about the nature of the self, that it's not one thing. And it's not this specific thing that you can identify and sort of like put borders around or put it in a box. The nature of the self is quite dynamic. So identifying the self is a challenge, and I think, to be fair to the subject, is that defining the self is a personal experience. There's no definition for the self. Everyone has their unique experience with who they are, what they are, and how they should approach themselves. And there is no substitute for self-discovery. Like, there's no one model, hey, learn this model, you'll figure out yourself, or take this test and you will figure out yourself. All of these are delusions. They might be helpful telling you something about yourself, some of your traits, some of your interests, some of your strengths, some of your personal, I would say, natural personal tendencies, but they won't tell you who you are. There's no alternative to going through a journey of self-discovery, which takes a lifetime, but as long as the person is pursuing this, then they are in good shape.
Yeah, so by self, what I meant was our entity being me, right? So is it just the physical entity, or are there other parts of this, right? So self is one part of that entity.
Well, obviously, again, this follows from the same things, that the self is not an easy thing to pinpoint. So definitely our physical being is part of who we are, but we all know there is much more to this. Most people think that we are made of the physical body, and we're made of the mental, psychological, or emotional aspect. But again, this is not the whole story of humans. We have other aspects of who we are. We have the spiritual element. We also have the social element. Some people might argue it's a psychological, emotional, but it's just a different dimension, the social aspect of who we are. So what we call the self is actually is a comprehensive, complex system of our physical being, our emotional being, our cognitive being, if you like, our spiritual, side of our makeup, etc., and the social side. Generally speaking, these would be probably the main areas of who we are.
Yeah, so there are so many different perspectives and beliefs about when it comes to the spirit, right? So just to have a basic understanding, what's the Islamic perspective about the spirit, ruh?
Allah answers this question in Surah Al-Isra as the people of Quraysh came to the Prophet ﷺ and they asked him, tell us about al-ruh, about the spirit or the soul. What is this thing? If you truly from Allah, from God, and to tell us what that really is. And the Prophet ﷺ asked Allah to tell him what the answer is. So the way Allah responded was by saying, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الرُّوحِ قُلِ الرُّوحُ مِنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّي وَمَا أُوتِيتُم مِنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. They ask you about the soul, about the spirit. Well, tell them, this is a matter that Allah or God kept to Himself. And what you have been given of the knowledge is very little. So Allah kept the knowledge of the ruh or the soul to Himself. But Allah told us in the Revelation, in His book and in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, some aspects about the soul that we need in order to be able to navigate this life. Not necessarily telling us what the soul is. We know it's a non-physical entity, and we know it's the essence of humans. It's the essence of who we call I or me. That's the reality of a human being. It's the soul. The body is mainly a vehicle. So it's the essence of human beings. But what is the soul made of? What is its nature as in terms of like physically describing it, its element? We don't know exactly, but there are certain clues in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ that actually shed some light and tell us something mainly from a functional perspective about the soul, rather than about what is the soul made of.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's fine, right? Like getting into what the soul actually is one thing, right? But what I remember from the course that I attended with you is that we have self, right? And then we have this ruh or spirit. And then we have heart. That's how you used to draw, right?
Yeah.
So ultimately, we are actually going to talk about how do we reach that level of azima and contentment and human excellence or ihsan. But again, to base that conversation somewhere, how do these different elements influence each other?
I see.
In a simple words.
So again, there are these different elements to who we are, and as we stated previously, in most cultures, these words are used interchangeably for most of the time. But and I would say one of the words that is used most elusively, most fluid, in the most fluid nature of a word is the word self or nafs in the Arabic language. And so sometimes it's used to refer to the ego, which is our base desires and the negative part of who we are. And sometimes it's used to refer to the heart itself or the person as a person. And sometimes the word self or nafs is actually also used to refer to the ruh, which is the spirit. And this is one of the sources of confusion. And somebody might suggest, look, okay, why don't we just call a spade a spade? Just call, like, use self in the most limited, constricted sense of the word, so we don't get it confused with other things. But the thing is, even the self has a lot to do with the ruh and the soul, and this is why it's used interchangeably. So this is not a random kind of fluid use of the language. It actually refers to a fact. So we can't just change a universal fact for the sake of convenient cognitive approach to things. So we have, but for learning reasons, we could actually do that temporarily, but not to use it in a general sense. We can refer to these three basic elements that usually pop up, and we can identify them. And in this context now, we're going to speak about them in the most constricted sense. So we will not use the words loosely. So when we talk about the self here, the first thing, the self basically is, we're talking about our physical composition, our cognitive mental composition, which is how we think, our logical thinking, our rational mind, and our immediate experience, which relates to this world. And on the other side, we have our very essence, which is non-physical, it's non-form. That's the soul, that's the spirit. It's part of the unseen world. No one has ever seen their own soul. No one has ever touched it or smelled it, or even, we don't know how it looks like. And we don't even know how it smells. So That's part of the unseen world, but we just know it because that's who we are. We know it exists. We feel it exists. We feel that's who we are. But and that's it. So this would be the second element. And usually it is this ruh, it is this spirit or the soul that we believe where the fitrah comes from. And the fitrah, as the Prophet ﷺ referred to it, and it's also there's a reference to it in the Quran, it's basically the innate nature of humans, which we believe in Islam is actually good. So we are moral, we know God in an intuitive sense, at that level of the soul. We love God and we seek Him. So we are good in that sense. We believe this fitrah comes from our spiritual nature, from our ruh. And then we have the heart. And the heart basically is what we're working with in this life. So our hearts come sort of, in a sense, they come empty. And what we do with the heart in this world, either it gets more influenced by the lower part of the self or the base part of the self, which is the ego. And if the ego colors the heart more, then the heart goes down and takes the attributes and the traits of the self, so it becomes bad. And that's going against the word of God, against the instructions of the Prophet ﷺ. Whereas if a person colors their heart with the content or the element of the soul, of the fitrah, of the good stuff, the moral stuff, then the heart would grow. And that's what we believe to be self-development, true self-development, spiritual growth. This is what we believe religiosity is actually about.
Exactly.
So these are the three elements in very basic terms and how they relate to each other.
This is great. This is a very good beginning, because I'm going to base my questions on this one. So I was reading today that in US, for instance, right, there's 1/5 of the population or 1/3 of the adult population under the age of 30, they believe that they are not affiliated with any religion, but they think that they are spiritual, right?
Yeah.
And then this is kind of a trend that's catching up, that mostly youth, including Muslim youth, they would claim that they are spiritual, but they are not religious, right? So when we talk about being spiritual, and when they talk about being spiritual, what's the difference here?
So basically, there is a reason why people are separating between religiosity and spirituality. In essence, and speaking from an Islamic perspective, they are one and the same. But what is called religious, being religious, people refer to the external aspects of religion. Like you pray, for example. This is something you do physically and people see. You fast, you give in charity, and people see that. So they see this as external actions. So, and you abide by a specific code of law and instructions and behavior and expectations. So people call religiosity, or refer to religiosity to mean these things. Whereas for them, they try to separate the ruh, or the spirit, is that I want to experience the joy of the soul, of my spirit, without adhering to a specific religion. And I think where this comes from is the abuse of religion. Throughout history, religion has been abused. So you'd find from different religions, you will find people who observe the outward actions of religion, the public external acts, deeds, but deep down they would not have real spiritual cultivation or truth. And this is what we call in Islam hypocrisy.
Exactly.
Nifaq. This is what we call as well riya, as a lesser form, less intense form of hypocrisy, which is showing off or doing things in public display of things. And so some of these people have corrupt hearts, but they do the external actions in order to impress people or to get the trust of people, and so on and so forth. So this is a very troubling sort of combination, because this is a discrepancy between the external and the internal, whereas the nature of humans is what's inside shows outside. So these people, I believe, who are separating these things are actually addressing a problem, which is this kind of duplicity, and they have a good reason there. But unfortunately, separating spirituality from the code of law or conduct or from the external aspect, it's easy for a person to feel spiritual but go wrong, go completely wrong. And what we have in Islam, just talking about Islam, is that we have the one who created the ruh, the spirit, and the one who put that in the human body and gave us the heart and gave us the self and gave us this experience. He's the one who said, take care of your hearts, take care of your soul, your spirit, you need to grow it. And I tell you, you could go wrong. So I'll give you all the I would say the roadmap as to how to navigate aspects of this world, what to do, what not to do, what to say, what not to say, what are the moral parameters and limits for you to be able to make sure that as you're tapping in your soul and expressing its beauty outward, you're doing that right. Because any person who starts with the ruh and they just start choosing their own actions and their own deeds, eventually they will end up with a religion which is a man-made religion.
Exactly, yeah.
Because the spirit, the soul needs some kind of an expression. And when that comes out, there will be people who will, I would say, excel in this area. So they would come up with advice, how to purify your soul, how to become more spiritual, how to become more of a spiritual being, or to grow your spiritual side, and so on and so forth. And these people become what we call gurus. Then they're going to come up with their own religion, and then people will start following them, and people will start adhering to what they say, and people will start to create a sense of loyalty and belonging based on what these gurus say. That's exactly what religion is, and that's why you try to leave in the first place.
Exactly.
So instead of just treating all religions or religiosity as one, I think we need a more, I would say, accurate approach by separating between false religiosity that is used for public image, etc., as opposed to real religiosity that is an accurate expression of the soul. That's how we should approach this. So those who say, I want to be spiritual, but I don't want to be religious. Okay, but your spirituality seeks expression. When you start expressing that, you're going to come up with your own way, or you're going to follow some gurus. And that's they're going to give you exact instructions, or you're going to come up with instructions. And that's exactly what a religion is. Then people who don't agree with you on this kind of expression, automatically as a human being, you're going to feel this distance between you and them. Why are you going against me? This is so good, I can feel it, but they're not feeling it, right? So then you're going to follow on the same thing that you attribute to religion. People are just using it. People are using it for war. It's causing dissension and wars and hatred among people. So you're going to end up just doing the same thing.
Exactly. This is exactly what my conclusion was. So now just coming back to the exclusively focusing on the Muslims and Muslim youth, right? So from their perspective, when they say that, we are spiritual but we are not religious, what actually they're trying to do or say is that we don't care about the ibadah and that's rituals, right? So we don't want to do this, but we are trying to be spiritual. So now the question now is that the importance of ibadah and the link of that to being actively spiritual and going to that level that you need to achieve.
We will come to the importance of ibadah and worship and to abide by it for the sake of spiritual health. But the issue with people who make this claim is that I want to be spiritual, I don't want to be religious, so I don't want to observe these etiquettes and these guidelines and so on and so forth. I just want to be spiritual. What these people are saying, I want to feel good. Because we don't know what the soul is. Even our inner experience, we don't know if it's coming from our souls or it's coming from our corrupt ego that is masking itself as a soul. So this is a world we don't have access to. We don't have a direct access to. We can't see into our hearts. We can't have such a clear vision. We're sort of like a blind person walking into this room, sensing their way out, touching things out to find their way. We don't see things as they are when it comes to the heart. It's just we're depending on feelings. And feelings are probably one of the innermost experiences of who we are. So we don't know exactly where they're coming from. So a person actually could be feeling good, which they think is spiritual, but they could be satisfying their ego and they could be doing something really bad. And there's a lot of people who express, and this happened, by the way, in the last century, in the 20th century.
Exactly.
There were people like some gurus who came from the sub-Indian continent, people like Osho, etc., and they started building these utopian cities, some of them in the US, and these people were actually getting into immoral acts. So they were buying lands of the local people and abusing their business and causing trouble to the local people. This happened in the US in the I believe in the 50s and the 60s. Yeah. And the whole locals started protesting about how this is destroying their communities and taking advantage of their land and so on and so forth. And then they were engaged in even improper sexual behavior. So and it was people from outside were seeing this as despicable, immoral, whereas these people were experiencing it as spiritual elevation. Yeah, exactly. So you could easily go wrong, because that's where Shaitan actually gets in and plays his game, because again, we're blind inside and we're just trying to find things out, and it's a very sensitive area. So, and the only tool that we have that people call spirituality is feeling good.
Exactly.
Or feeling high.
Yeah.
But the self is very good at masking it as a soul, and it could give you a fake sense of feeling high, and you don't realize, you think it's your soul. There were spiritual people who ended up, as happened as well in the 20th century, earlier on in the 20th century, where there were some cults who ended up committing suicide, killing their own children. Mass kind of suicide. A couple before, as their leader, their guru, he told them he had a vision, and they were believing in it. They were feeling spiritual. They were actually willfully killing themselves, feeling high at that time. But he instructed them, before you kill yourselves, you have to kill your children, because we're going to save ourselves. That's what spirituality could lead to, without guidance from God. So yeah, at the beginning it feels good. It feels, I'm detaching from these religious people, because some of them, might display, harsh attitudes, improper behaviors, or many people already associate religion and religiosity with war and hate and what happened in the past and warfare, not knowing that these are actually human mistakes, these are human errors, and they're not the fault of religion or spirituality itself. So anyway, anytime you go away from the guidance that is given by the one who created your soul, created yourself, created your heart, anytime you just get out of that, you're definitely heading in the wrong direction. You're going to end up doing worse than what you were trying to avoid, because you did not identify the problem accurately. You lumped all of that together.
Exactly. Those who are just going on that spiritual adventurism, right? So they could go wrong, because you are not basing anything in solid belief, right? So again, I would say that probably the prerequisite is to have true belief, and then from true belief you can definitely have guidance. So if you could please speak to this continuum of starting with the true belief, and then ibadah, and then the spiritual upliftment, so that people can get it. What is the prerequisite? What do I need to have to begin with, right? And then that would put me on the right track to achieving human excellence, or reach the level of ihsan and azima.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I think everyone asks themselves this question at some level, not necessarily consciously, but this question is gnawing at them, in the sense we're trying to find our way in this life. And that's the call of our fitrah, our innate nature. And I think that's the starting point, is to listen to these questions inside of you. There's an urge inside of everyone, and that's the urge of the fitrah, to find Allah, to find the way to Allah, to know what Allah wants, to know what life is about, and to find one's way in this life. And so we at an intuitive level, at the level of fitrah and soul, we understand the value of our life. So we try to find that out. We try to utilize it. We try to connect with this need. That's the best starting point. Most people try to start intellectually. They say, or I want to learn something, I want to read something. Well, reading might actually get you to ask the questions. It might get you to reflect and introspect. But the real starting point is to look inside, to listen to the genuine questions, the most innate questions that we have as human beings, because that's your natural curiosity and inquisitive nature. And that's when you learn the most. That's when you learn at a deep level. So when you respond to this, when you pay attention to this natural curiosity and engage with it, and try to listen to the questions, try to pay attention to them, not avoid them, not try just to write them on paper and move on. No, listen to them, have a discussion with them. Generally speaking, they will nudge the person towards asking, what is my life about? What am I supposed to do here? And if it gets clearer, even the person would just feel the existence of Allah, of God, and they would try to find them and want to engage with them, want to connect with him, or want to connect with him. So I think that's the best starting.
That's the starting point. Yeah,
absolutely. Finding what I would put it this way: finding this hunger, this thirst inside of you, connecting with it, identifying with it, establishing yourself there, then starting from that point. This makes you humble. It's not like I know it all. You don't say this person knows it all. You don't say this scientist knows it all, or this TV station knows it all, this philosopher knows it all. No, it makes you humble and thirsty for the truth. You're open. You're searching for the truth. You want to see where the truth is. And as long as you're established there, this is a very powerful place to be in, because anything that goes against it, anything that sort of forms or makes you feel there's an onslaught or an attack on this feeling, that's a red flag. That's a red flag. And usually when people are in this inquisitive state, when they listen to the Quran, if they understand it, if it's in Arabic or if it's translated into their own languages, their hearts are open. Usually that's when they start connecting with it. So I would say just embracing and engaging with this natural thirst that we find in ourselves about who we are, what life is, who Allah really is, what am I supposed to do with my life. That's your starting point before anything else.
And then building on that starting point?
Building on the starting point, avenues will open up for you. I would say listen, watch, don't trust anyone. And see how everything you read, everything you hear, everything you come across, see how it resonates, how this inquisitive nature responds to it. Then if you are sincere, that's why I said you have to start from there. You're humble. You don't have any prejudgment. And this is what really sincerity is about. You want the truth and nothing but the truth. Not because something seems to be philosophically appealing or intellectually appealing, that's the truth. Or because the person who's presenting it is very charismatic, that's the truth. Or because I know this person and I trust that person, whatever they say, it must be the truth. All of these are the wrong starting points. Allah gave you this criterion. Allah gave you this navigation rod, and you should utilize it. And when you have this humility and this sincerity to find the truth and settle for nothing but the truth and stay open, and then you turn to Allah, even if you say you think you don't know Allah very well, at least turn to that intuitive sense about who your creator is, who your source of being is. Turn to him, guide me, show me. And if the person is sincere and they do their best, they can't be misguided. They just can't be misguided. One day they will come across the truth. They will see the truth. Allah will put it on their way. And if a person happens not or to miss the truth during their lifetime, if they have been sincere and approaching it the way we just described, hopefully they would be excused with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's what many people before Islam, they were in that state. We have a person called Zayd ibn Amr ibn Nufayl, who lived before the Prophet ﷺ. He actually was alive when the Prophet ﷺ was there, but before the Prophet ﷺ received, he had died before the Prophet ﷺ received the revelation. His name was Zayd ibn Amr ibn Nufayl. And this person, he always was searching for God, and he used to say, oh God, if I know how to pray, I would pray, but the only thing I know is to put my head down just like this. And that's what he used to do. Then he used to turn to the people of Quraysh and say, you're worshipping idols. That's not true. That could not be the true religion. So how did he know all of that? He looked at the Jews and the Christians, and he looked into their scripture, and he looked at their practices, and he said, this can't be true. He didn't accept their ways because he felt that they were not going or following their revelation. And again, it did not resonate with that pure nature that he had. The Prophet ﷺ said about this person, he would be resurrected on the day of judgment by himself as one nation, and he's in paradise. So that's our starting point. And if we engage with the Quran and the Sunnah and the Islamic knowledge from the standpoint of this thirst and this sincerity, then that's a very powerful, that's the way to go about learning Islam, rather than just, hey, I just have to learn Islam because I have to learn it because I'm a Muslim. You might get the education, but you won't be enlightened by that with that attitude.
Exactly.
Because you need the fire before the information comes.
But just to make it attractive for those who are kind of detached, right? So from my personal experience, the kind of work that I do, there are so many Muslim youth which are completely detached from religion, from the deen. And there needs to be some starting point for them. So I was thinking the other day that every one of us wants to be successful in life, right? Everyone wants to be happy. Everyone wants to be loved, right? But deep inside, we have anger, we have hatred, we have other those kinds of feelings, right? I'm trying to figure out that what would be the point of engagement for those youth which are detached.
It is a big question, and there's something very interesting about human nature is that we don't happen to have anger. We don't happen to have hopes. We don't happen to have a goal. And I think if we want to engage with the youth, we need to dig deeper than that. Just merely talking to people about success, it might be attractive, but it might not hit deep. So if we engage with people at the level of you want success, that's at the surface even for them. Usually the pursuit of success is actually an attempt to answer a deeper need. So if we don't figure out what that need is, we could be just entangled with them at that surface level, and never arrive anywhere.
Exactly.
And we're not here to teach people how to be financially successful. Maybe some people are in this business, but generally speaking, if you're trying to engage with the Muslim youth, and especially those who are disengaged from the masajid, from the practicing their religion, then I don't think we are in the business of teaching them how to make money or how to be successful in a business and career. So being stuck with them at that level is very problematic. And I believe the thing is, we have to engage with the youth at a personal level. Everyone has a story, and people, as I said, don't happen to have anger, don't happen to have dreams and goals. All of these are responses. All of this is at the surface. We need to dig deep down. There are deeper needs in every human being, and these needs are genuine and they are noble. So if we can navigate through these surface sort of desires, even if they are legitimate, and dig deeper to see them a response of what, then we can engage with the person at a deeper level, and we can build a more meaningful relationship. And then you're gonna find, usually if someone has anger, or someone has an exaggerated desire for success, financial success or material success, usually this is a response for something. Let's see what went wrong. Let's see what this person is missing, what they're trying to find out. Because oftentimes we have good needs, but the way we try to satisfy them is not necessarily going to lead us to satisfaction. But we just feel at this level, hey, if I get rich, okay, I'll be alright. This whole problem will go away.
Yeah.
Some people have a history of abuse. Okay, this abuse will go away. But then they will be shocked that when they arrive and they become wealthy, that the abuse is actually there, still has
Exactly.
So a person doesn't have to wait a lifetime to figure out, hey, your solutions might actually not be true solutions to the problems you're seeking to deal with. So it takes wisdom. It takes someone who's able to engage with those youth at a deeper level, know them personally, and see what their true needs are. So there are needs, collective needs of a generation, a specific generation, because of the common circumstances they're going through, the kind of education they're going through, this time in human history that they are actually, that they are teenagers during this time, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So what are the peculiarities about their time and about their age? But then there are individual cases and stories. So I think anyone who wants to work with the youth, they need to put their heart and mind in the process, being able to understand the generation as a whole, and then connect with individuals, with each individual alone, and help them navigate their inner world. And when that happens, one of the biggest human needs, especially for youth, is the need to feel understood. And most people don't feel understood, and that's one of the main sources of their trauma. So if we are able to engage with someone, once they feel they're understood, trust is built, and that's how you can influence them.
Exactly. We as parents probably don't frame the things for them as effectively as we need to, right? Again, to begin with, the belief, right? The true belief. So if that's not there, we won't be able to engage them in the ibadah as effectively as we could. And what is ibadah actually, right? And if you do ibadah the way it should be, how that leads to the true connection with Allah.
It goes in line with what we said about the youth. I mean, let's apply it to this model. We humans have this, in our very essence, we have this ruh, and this ruh is good. So this is where the fitrah comes from. And in the fitrah, which is in our spiritual instinct, we already have an intuitive knowledge about God, about Allah, who He is, our relationship to Him, and we have this desire to connect with Him, and to be in good terms with Him, and to get closer to Him. That's in every human being. We're born with that. And that's our starting point. So we're given a head start. We're already given that. And as a parent, if we try to, I would say, and most of us do this, we try to cut corners because we focus on the external aspects of worship. I want you to pray. I want you to fast. I want you to behave as a Muslim, like good manners. But the thing is, these are expressions of the essence of humans. These are an expression of our very nature. So when you just focus on the expression without activating the essence, which these deeds should be an expression of, you're actually, you're building the foundations for hypocrisy. You are building the foundation because you're telling your child, hey, you need to do the external actions.
Regardless of what's in.
Forget, this is not even mentioned.
Yeah.
So the child gets this impression. What's really important is the external display of things,
Exactly.
the public display of all of these things. And where it comes from, that's not even an issue. And that's the problem, because that's the textbook definition of hypocrisy.
Yeah.
And the problem is that this is why most parents struggle with their kids, because you're trying to force your kid to do something, which is what you're trying to get your kid to do is already in their essence. Their essence is the love of Allah. Their essence is this need to connect with Allah. So all you need to do is activate that, connect with that, and then help the child express this in the way that you want them to, which is obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then that's the most natural way. That's the organic way. The first way is more like, changing, things genetically, like genetically modified food, or using pesticides and chemicals to overgrow and get more produce. But you're ruining the quality, you're causing disease, you're causing issues, you're damaging even the planet. But you have the organic way that's much more sustainable, it's much more natural, it doesn't need as much even spending and budget and so on, and it goes naturally. All you have to do is just sort of kickstart it, and it keeps going on its own. It's because it's natural. That's how we're designed to do. But when you do it the genetically modified way, then you have to sort of engineer every step of the way. You have to do it hands-on, and it becomes highly mechanized.
Exactly.
And that requires a lot of management, a lot of attention. It becomes more of a torture. And then ultimately it's going to backfire because you've done it all wrong. So all you need to do, tap into the spiritual nature, slowly let the child, help them, take them by the hand, help them make the connection from their fresh, raw love of Allah, help them slowly build the connection to how to translate this into prayer. Translate that into maybe having good morals and good like behaving well and being kind and being generous, because that's the most natural way. You're just helping your child sort of grow naturally. You're providing organic fertilizers.
Exactly.
That's all you need to do.
Yeah.
But for you to engineer it and force your child to do something or pressure them to do something while the whole essence is missing, this is painful for everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's probably the most difficult thing. Apparently it's easy and you're expressing those deep thoughts. But from a practical perspective, most parents, they just don't get it. Particularly the love aspect of ibadah, that's your ibadah is your expression of love.
Yeah.
Right? That element is critically missing. So again, from the how perspective, right? It's not easy. So if I'm a parent, I'm watching this conversation, right? I would like to know that how do I do this?
Well, the thing is, and the proverb goes, the one who doesn't have something, they can't give it.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
If we as parents pray out of love, because really the meaning of worship in Islam is love in essence, and then the other elements, flow from it. But when we acts of worship, meaning we express our natural raw love of God in this human form, physical, verbal, mental engagement, and spiritual. So it's a way, and it's divinely prescribed. So the one who created the soul and put that need for expression in it, and the one who created the self and made it a tool for that expression, he's the one who designed all of this. So it's definitely natural. So that's what the meaning of worship is. That was you're worshipping, you are expressing your genuine love of God in these constructive ways. And by definition, then you can't force anyone to worship. Because if it's not an expression of love, it's not worship. Same thing, you can't force anyone to be a Muslim, because Muslim means submission, like the willful submission. They choose to submit. So once you force someone into Islam, it's no longer Islam.
Exactly.
By definition, it's a contradiction of the very definition. So again, what I would recommend for parents is that the work is already done. You don't need to do anything. It's done by Allah. All you need to do is sort of gently support it. Be supportive. Be loving. Be caring. Be genuine. And the most important thing is that when the child senses of their parents true love of Allah and expression of that love, and iman and faith shows in someone's life. It shows in how we respond to hardships. It shows how we behave at time under stress. It shows how we behave at times of joy. How we respond to moments when there is a person in need, or when even when we're cornered in very difficult times, how we respond to that. Our faith shows. The child is going to see the response, and they're going to also feel our attitude. That's how we, I don't say we teach them, but we sort of awaken that very good thing in them.
Exactly.
So without being able to do this, it's I would say we can't keep cutting corners.
Exactly.
And if we keep faking it, just do this. I know with some children it might work out for some reason, but that's a prescription for disaster.
So one last thing that I'm constantly trying to frame is that most of those building social and emotional maturity among youth, right? Most of those exercises are to help them to control their emotions so that they don't go on tangents and stay on the right path. So following this model, I hope that we as parents, we understand the context, we understand the needs on all sides and the related emotions. But again, speaking of the benefits, right, that if you truly try to follow this model, then how that would help you, what are the critical elements, right, like the critical elements and the benefits. Like you have to have tawakkul, right? You have to put that trust in Allah, or does it come with your staying in the spiritual aspect of yourself a lot?
Generally speaking, and we said that all these good meanings, beautiful meanings, are natural to us. They're in our fitrah. So it's pretty much, let me give the analogy which is given in the Quran of a seed. We have the seed inside of us. If you rip a seed open and try to pull the elements out of it, you've ruined it, you've killed it. You're not going to get anything.
Exactly.
But all you need to do, you can't grow a seed. But what you can do is let it grow and support it to grow. So you place the seed in the soil, you water it, you provide it with fertilizers or nutrition, or you just leave it because it's already there. And you wait for it and you let it grow. You observe it growing. If something external obstructs that kind of growth, then you might intervene minimally to unblock any obstruction or something like that. And that's exactly how we should treat children. Is that the seed is there, what we have to do is put them in a good environment that activates the element of that seed, of that fitrah, of that spiritual nature, spiritual instinct, and scaffold it, protect it from external dangers. Provide it with good example, an environment, with love, and the soul is going to grow. The beauty in the soul is going to grow when it sees outside the generosity. It's not like going to pick it up from outside, but the view of generosity is going to activate the seed of generosity inside of us in our spiritual nature, and it's just going to start blossoming and unfolding. So slowly, if we do this with tawakkul, again, the child sees the level of trust in Allah from the parents. It inspires. When you see, by the way, like generally speaking, in modern words, what tawakkul really looks like, by people who believe in God and people who don't believe in God, but they believe in something, by the way, is what we call courage. Courage is a form of tawakkul. It's one of the most obvious forms of tawakkul. And everyone who sees a moment of courage gets inspired. And the reason for this inspiration is that something awakened, what they saw awakened something in their fitrah. It resonated. So it started growing. It was sort of activated. It was primed. And when it's primed, they get hooked. They admire this person. And if there is more consistent display of courage, a person would develop that courage within themselves. It's not like they learned courage. It's within them. But because the environment was supportive, it grew. And it unfolded into a full plant.
Exactly.
Same thing with tawakkul. When I teach them tawakkul, when they see tawakkul outside, it resonates with them. It inspires them. It primes the natural tawakkul inside of them, and it starts to grow. So you don't have to tell your child, "Hey, put your trust in Allah." That doesn't do anything. It just doesn't do anything. It's lip service. But what gets them to do this is that next time you're hit by a calamity as a father or as a mother, they see that you put your trust in Allah. You're not scared. They see the courage.
You display that. Yeah,
exactly.
Become the role model.
That's it. They get inspired. When people get inspired, by the way, comes from Latin, inspirita, which means in spirit. In spirit, in the soul. You're more based in your soul, in your spiritual side. So it means something awakened. You're feeling your soul. Something awakened your soul. Something awakened this fitrah, this spiritual instinct. So that's actually the roadmap for parents and for teachers to educate. If you look at the life of whatever we have of the life of the Prophet ﷺ about raising kids, you won't find much. If you look for details, you're not going to find much. You'll find a few instances, yes, but you put them together. You can't build a way of rearing children merely by these examples,
Exactly.
there'll be a lot of gaps. But raising kids in the life of the Prophet and the companions is embedded in every aspect of their life. It's not necessarily pointed to, hey, this is how you raise a kid, but everything about the Prophet, everything about the companions, about their life, about how they handle different conditions and how they handle different people, that caused the natural state of humans, that seed, just grow. It provided a healthy environment, supportive environment, so the seeds grew. As simple as that. That's really what parenting boils down to. Or we think we have robots that we have to program.
Exactly.
And that's where we go wrong, because a robot is empty, and you're gonna fill that drive with information. Fine, it's gonna be receptive. But the human nature is not empty. So when you teach something, or you teach something in a way that goes against the norms of the ruh or the self, they're gonna fight back.
Exactly.
So what you need to do is actually run along the lines of the ruh and the self, manage them well. That's what you need to do. So it's more of I'll take a digression here. It's more like a dance. You dance with this human nature. As a parent, that's how you have to deal with it.
So this is very interesting, and the reason that I kind of did it through different ways, but the core message is this, and what actually impressed me a lot was that I didn't deliberately ask that question, and I didn't deliberately framed it this way, but my idea behind this conversation was to present this particular aspect of Islam, right? Because always when we define Islam, what is Islam, and we say these are the pillars and this is that and whatever, right? This is a totally different perspective of Islam. If it's new for me, imagine it's new for many out there, right? If we not just frame Islam this particular way, but you live Islam this particular way, then all those negative associations with Islam, that if a kid is going for halakha in the masjid, then he's going to get to the extreme, or he's going to get into violence and extremism and those kinds of things. Or they are taught something negative, or all those negative connotations attached to Islam, right? But if you look at it from this particular perspective, then this is the solution to most of the problems that we are seeing out there in the community, whether that Muslim youth suffering from those elements or the non-Muslim youth, right? Not just youth, but human beings in general. This is about our deen, right? And the way we frame it. But I'm thinking that if you frame it this particular way, then there's no way that if you live a life of a spiritual life based on this particular model, try to be here, away from here, and still go to the extreme, still have that anger and frustration and negativity and hate inside of you.
Yeah.
Right? So just this final touch to give it from that particular perspective, that this is the essence of our true belief. This is the essence of our deen, right?
Yeah. These are the dynamics.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're not. There's nothing changing about Islam here. I mean, if you look carefully at the life of the Prophet ﷺ and his companions, and the majority of the Muslims throughout history, you can actually see this pattern running. But sometimes we look at, or we read our history through a cultural lens, and many things go missing. And I believe this usually goes missing in our modern or more contemporary Muslim cultures, is that we're more focused on external actions, the public display of things, rather than the real dynamics. Because human nature, we have to understand human nature and work with it. Actually, Ibn al-Qayyim, he has a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful analogy in his book about human nature. He actually says human nature is... He gives an example, an analogy. He says, there is a river, very powerful river. And sometimes it overflows. So it destroys people's fields, crops, and sometimes houses. So there were 3 types of people who tried to deal with it. So one group of people decided to leave it as it is. ignore it. When it comes, we'll just deal with whatever consequences. And these are basically, he said, these are the people who don't cultivate themselves. Whatever happens, happens. Whatever, like, people follow their desires, follow whatever comes up. Generally speaking, we're talking about these some of these people say, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. And he said there's another group of people who decided, no, they said what we will do, we'll create a dam to stop the river so it doesn't come even here and doesn't destroy anything. And a group of this second group was two groups into that one category. The second one said, no, we're going to go to where the river gushes from, where it springs from, and go and block that spring so it doesn't have to come here. The third group, they said, the river is not bad. What we can do, we can change its direction and we can create canals so when it overflows, this overflow is channeled through other canals and we can drive those canals to new fields and grow more stuff. So there would be no damage and we're going to use this and benefit from it instead of being harmed by it. So he said the first group obviously is going to eventually ruin their homes and maybe drown them, the ones who just let it go, flow as it is. The second group, which was two groups actually, people who either blocked it right from where it springs or created a dam, he said the build-up of the flow of water is going to build up even more and grow until a point of eruption where it will be complete devastation and destruction. And the third group are the only ones who are going to survive it. And he says this is human nature. This is how wise people deal with human nature. You're not supposed to block it. You're not supposed to ignore it. You're supposed to understand it and manage it well to the way where you maximize the benefit and almost maybe just cancel or exterminate the harm completely. So this is what Islam really does with us. It tells us how to manage our human nature.
Exactly.
And we need to understand this nature to be able to manage it well and benefit from it. Otherwise, if we go against human nature, it's like we're building a dam. It's going to build up and one day it will just blow the dam.
Exactly. So from the life of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the time that he came and the situation that was there in Makkah and the way people were going in different directions, so how did he manage to awaken this particular dynamic and take them from that level to the level that we all aspire to achieve?
Well, a careful reading of the life of the Prophet ﷺ shows that his most powerful tool was his example.
That role model.
Absolutely. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about him that he's uswatun hasana. He's the best role model. And that's how the way the Prophet inspired people. People who believed in him, people who knew his honesty, his integrity, even before Islam. So when the ones who believed in him, once he just told them to worship Allah alone, they had no question about it. They had no concern. The whole issue of that being true or not didn't even cross their minds. The spiritual nature of belief flew into what the Prophet said, because he's an inspiration. He's a living example of what he preaches. And we have a lot of examples of people meeting the Prophet for the first time and they are just amazed. They're sort of completely drawn into the beauty of his character and his manners. We have even one statement from one of the rabbis of the Jews in Medina. As soon as the Prophet ﷺ arrived in Medina, one of those Jewish rabbis, he said, those Arabs, they have gathered around this person who claims to be a prophet. He had just come from Mecca. So this person and his cousin decided to go and check him out. And they were learned rabbis. So they went to see him and they recognized his face. We have Abdullah ibn Salam, one of the most learned of the Jews of Medina, Abdullah ibn Salam. He was asked, how did you become a Muslim? And he said, when the Prophet came and the people of Medina gathered around him, I wanted to check him out. He said, I came and looked at his face. So he says in Arabic, فَلَمَّا رَأَيْتُهُ عَلِمْتُ أَنَّ وَجْهَهُ لَيْسَ بِوَجْهِ كَذَّابٍ. When I saw him, I recognized this is not the face of a liar. This is an honest person. Automatically, you build the trust with that person. We have a story of Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam when he was in the prison. The other prisoners, they came to him and they said, "Inna naraka min al-muhsinin." They told him their dreams to interpret them. They said, "We see you like a very good person." It's that kind of inspiration. Everyone who met the Prophet ﷺ was taken by this beauty. We have a beautiful story of on the way from Mecca to Medina when the Prophet ﷺ was migrating. He met separately a man, and then he met his wife separately, Abu Ma'bad and Ma'bad. And they gave beautiful description of who the Prophet ﷺ was. It was such a profound description. It was full of inspiration. And it just tells you that that was one of the most powerful tools. And then all other means of communication the Prophet ﷺ exercised: preaching, speaking with people, sending letters, admonishing, warning. All of these were just to get people to see what he has, to get their attention, mainly. To get to see what he has to offer them. So it all boils down to this same thing.
So all boils down for me to two things. One is that if you are spiritually at that level, even if a little less than that level, but it will show up, right?
Absolutely.
In your character, in your expressions, in your...
Yeah, and it's not very complex.
Yeah.
It's all about honesty. Just be honest. That's all it means. That's all it takes.
So this is one. Number two, the role model, right? So I was reading probably your blog where it was saying that Islam is not under threat, it's the Muslims under threat, right? It was probably one of your blogs. So we, all that we need to do is work on ourselves, right? And if we work on ourselves, so this is the benefit to us to begin with, but then that in itself is going to, we become the role models, right?
Exactly. Sometimes we're worried so much about how do we show Islam, how do we show Islam shows. If you live Islam,
if you live Islam, that's the point.
Yeah, it shows.
It
shows. That's its nature. It's human nature. Islam and human nature are the same, by the way. True human nature. So when you just live Islam, and it's gonna show, then all you need is a minimal level of communication. That's all. But when you have all you're doing is just PR,
exactly,
but there's no real substance to this. It's gonna come across as fake.
Exactly. Well, shukran, jazakumullah khairan ya Sheikh.
It's my pleasure.
This is very, very inspiring, and I hope I do justice to this conversation and make it as presentable and as effective as I could. So I'll try my best.
Inshallah.
Jazakumullah khairan.
Thank you so much.
Assalamu alaikum.